let's look forward. Glad that's over. All right, 2015. Now, you may see this a lot in the papers. It's kind of become the operating cliche, but the reality is we are in the midst of a currency war. So let me explain what that is. There is a lot, it's supply and demand, right? So everybody had some economics, and so you know those curves. There's a lot of economic supply on the planet. There's not enough economic demand on the planet. So what's happening is that growth rates are slow, unemployment rates globally are high, and price pressures are deflating, okay? So as growth is elusive, countries are having to compete for growth the way two drugstores would across the street from each other. So if I own the Walgreens and Stacy owned the CVS and I need to make my quarterly numbers, I might discount Tide by 20%. And maybe her customers come over to me. That's exactly what the central banks are doing around the planet, right? They're devaluing their currency, and the purpose of devaluing the currency is try to gain more market share in global growth, try and import a little bit of inflation. So it is a competition no different than Walgreens and CVS. Well, the good news is the global economy should grow a little bit quicker this year. So this is the IMF basically saying the developed economies will grow 2 and change, the emerging economies will grow 4 and change, and put them together, and what do you got? You got about a 3.4% growth rate, I think, off of 3.2 last year. So the good news is there should be a little bit of an acceleration in growth for everyone. Now, let's take a look at Chairman Yellen's field intelligence and see how the U.S. Central Bank is going to battle plan for the currency war. All right, well, right now, real GDP in the U.S. is forecast to go from 2.3% to 3.3%. Now, all I'm doing is pulling down street intelligence, so that's consensus expectations there. Why? The job market's getting a little better. We've had oil prices come down considerably. Consumers are 70% of the economy, so if they get more money and they spend less on oil, then maybe they spend more on other stuff. Supposedly that's good for the economy. Well, in that kind of situation where you've got unemployment rates coming down to 5.6, 5.7%, typically, historically, that means the Fed is getting ready to raise interest rates, right? Because we've got growth and we've got the timer on the presentation. I can vamp. It's more fun with the slides, though. Anyway, so unemployment comes down close to the stated natural unemployment rate, and you end up raising rates, right? Well, on the other side, we have wages only growing about 1.6% year over year. So what do? The Fed's in a bind because it's got a dual mandate. First, we've got to increase employment, but they've already sort of accomplished that task. Second, we have to raise price levels towards the target, which is 2%, and they've underperformed on that task. And so it really puts the Fed into a bind. So what is the Fed going to do? Well, the Fed has signaled to us that they are going to raise rates this year, and maybe as soon as the middle of June. So if you look at street expectations, the street expects the Fed funds rate to be 1% by the end of the year, up from 25 basis points now, and they expect the 10-year rate to be over 3%, and we're really only at, don't do that again, please. Let's see, here we are. So the street expects 10-year treasuries to be over 3%, up from 2.23% today. So that's more restrictive. So if you look at General Yellen's battle plan based upon the field information, she wants to strike to preempt inflation. You know, maybe what inflation's out there, we haven't seen it yet, but maybe it's coming, so maybe we should raise rates. She also wants to contain asset bubbles, which was uncharacteristic for the Fed, but they actually came out and said small caps look pricey, biotechs look pricey. It was kind of a nod to Alan Greenspan's irrational exuberance comment. One thing is for sure, and Jack Lew was on TV this morning, they don't really pay much attention to the dollar and just view that anything happening because of a stronger dollar is simply collateral damage. So Yellen interested in raising rates. Let's take a look at Europe, which gets a lot of attention. I'm not going to address Greece, but I will in Q&A if you want me to. In terms of Europe, what General Draghi is seeing, who runs the European Central Bank, is a growth rate that's basically zero, and it has been zero. If you look at the unemployment situation in Europe, This is the US. Obviously, we've improved a lot. Here's the comparison with Europe. Unemployment rates in Europe are painfully high, very difficult situation. And finally, Europe has tipped into deflation officially, or negative price increases. And that's really bad for a nation that's got a lot of debt. So Europe's got problems. What are we going to do about it? Well, finally, Draghi, after threatening 3 years ago quantitative easing, actually did launch quantitative easing. So just like the US, he's guaranteed to print at least €1 trillion to support the economy. And his ambition is to weaken the euro and basically siphon growth away from the United States, right? So that they can increase asset markets, they can grow the economy, they can increase jobs and also inflation. So they're cutting rates, we're raising rates. All right, last, the Japanese, right? Okay, so in Japan, it's just like the European story, only so much longer. So Japan's not really had any growth for 20 years, and they haven't really had any inflation either. So Shinzo Abe, who's the prime minister, came into office and promised to revive the Japanese economy and said, we're going to get GDP up to 2%, and we're going to get inflation up to 2% by damn. And so how's he going to do that? Well, the first thing they did, notice a theme, was devalue the yen. So the yen's gone down 60% over the past few years, and the stock market's gone up about 100% over the past few years. And so they're doing everything they can to try and goose asset prices. And the Japanese are nothing if not resolute. Not only has their central bank agreed to buy bonds, but they also agreed to buy stocks and real estate. In fact, they're printing so much money that by the end of their campaign, they may own everything in Japan. So victory or death, they're in it for real. All right, so now let's put a scoreboard together. Who's winning the currency war? Well, the Japanese are by far increasing the amount of their balance sheet relative to their economy more than anybody else. And so the Bank of Japan gets the blue ribbon. Second is the ECB. Now, the reason I gave them second and third, and I debated this, and I know a lot of you in the room are probably debating this too. That's a joke, I know you're not. So the European Central Bank actually has been shrinking its balance sheet and pursuing austerity at the same time. Shocker, that was bad for the economy. Well, now they realize the error of their ways. Austerity measures have eased a little bit, and now they've decided to print. But given the fact that they have decided to print and we're constricting our supply, we'll go ahead and give them the second place trophy. And the Fed really is being neighborly. The US Fed has decided that we really love the Europeans, we really love the Japanese, and so we're more than willing to let our currency appreciate, let them have a little growth, let them have a little inflation, and so we therefore are losing the currency war.